I arrived at my parents' home for a family dinner, excited to share news about my promotion. The atmosphere was tense from the moment I walked in, with my perfect sister Jessica already there with her husband. When I mentioned using my bonus for a solo trip to Hawaii, my father erupted at the dinner table. "You're selfish, not like your sister. Jessica always thinks of others." I, tired of years of comparison, calmly responded, "Good. Then I'm done paying her rent." The table fell completely silent. The silence that followed my statement was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking loudly as everyone froze with forks midair. My father's face transformed from anger to confusion, his bushy eyebrows knitting together as he processed what I'd just said. "What do you mean, paying her rent?" he finally asked, his voice unnaturally quiet. I hadn't planned to expose Jessica's secret this way. For 3 years, I'd been silently transferring money to her account every month, covering half of her rent after she lost her job at the marketing firm where she worked. She had fallen into depression, struggled to find new employment, and faced financial ruin. As her older sister, I stepped in without hesitation, working overtime at my accounting firm to support both myself and secretly help her. "Nothing," Jessica interrupted, her voice shrill as she shot me a warning glance. "Adriana's just being dramatic." My mother, always the peacekeeper, nervously rearranged the breadbasket. "Let's talk about something else. Adriana, how is your new project going?" But the damage was done. I couldn't take back my words, nor did I want to. For years, I'd watched my family praise Jessica as the giving, selfless daughter. She volunteered at church every Sunday, helped organize family reunions, and was always available to drive our parents to appointments. Meanwhile, I was labeled the career, focused, selfish one because I worked 60-hour weeks and couldn't always attend every family function. What no one knew was that those 60-hour weeks were partly to ensure I could help Jessica financially without anyone knowing. She had begged me not to tell our parents about her financial troubles, saying it would break their hearts to know she was struggling. "Jessica, is this true?" my father pressed, ignoring my mother's attempt to change the subject. "Has Adriana been helping you with rent?" Jessica's husband, Scott, looked equally confused. "What rent payments?" he asked, turning to Jessica. "You told me we were managing fine on my salary." The perfect family dinner was unraveling quickly. Jessica's face flushed red as all eyes turned to her. "It's not what you think," she stammered. "Adriana helped a couple of times when things were tight, that's all." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and slid it across the table to my father. 3 years, every month, $1,200, half their rent. My father scrolled through the transaction history, his face growing increasingly pale. My mother leaned over his shoulder, gasping softly as she saw the evidence. "But you told us you were back on your feet after just a few months," my mother said to Jessica, her voice barely above a whisper. "You said you found freelance work." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I did find some work, but it wasn't enough. I was going to tell you once things stabilized." 3 years isn't a couple of times when things were tight, Jess," I said quietly. The most shocking revelation came when Scott spoke up. "Jessica told me her parents were helping us," he said, his face a mask of confusion. "She said you two were covering the difference until she found full-time work again." Jessica began to cry in earnest now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. I didn't want anyone to worry. I thought I could fix things on my own. But that wasn't the whole truth, and I knew it. 2 weeks earlier, I had accidentally seen a text on Jessica's phone when she asked me to check the time while she was driving us to a family brunch. It was from our mother, praising Jessica for making it on your own after all that trouble last year. Jessica had been taking credit for pulling herself up financially, all while accepting my help in secret. "Jessica told us months ago that she was completely independent now," my mother explained, looking at me with newfound confusion. "She said she didn't need anyone's help anymore." "She's been telling everyone that," I confirmed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Meanwhile, I've been sending money every month. Money from those overtime hours you've been criticizing me for working instead of coming to family events." The dinner I had arrived at, so hopefully 2 hours earlier, a dinner meant to celebrate my promotion to senior financial analyst, had transformed into something else entirely. Not only had my moment of achievement been overshadowed, as usual, by comparisons to Jessica, but now 3 years of deception were exposed for everyone to see. My father, still scrolling through my banking history, looked up at me with eyes I couldn't quite read. Why would you do this and not tell us? We could have helped. Jessica asked me not to tell you, I said simply. She said she was embarrassed and didn't want to worry you and Mom. Jessica's husband pushed his chair back from the table abruptly. I need some air, he said, walking out to the back porch. The perfect dinner was officially over, and with it the perfect image of my sister that my family had maintained for so long. As I reached for my phone, my father held onto it for a moment longer, our eyes meeting. For the first time in years, he looked at me not with disappointment or criticism, but with something new, a dawning recognition that perhaps he hadn't seen me clearly at all. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with the 3 glasses of wine I'd consumed after leaving my parents' house early. My phone showed 5 missed calls from Jessica, 2 from my mother, and a single text from Scott that simply read, "We need to talk." I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when my doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised to find Jessica standing in the hallway, though I was taken aback by her appearance. My usually perfectly put together sister looked like she'd barely slept, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing sweatpants instead of her typical designer jeans. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. I stepped aside wordlessly. We'd been here before, Jessica, making a mistake, coming to me to fix it. It was a pattern established since childhood when I would take the blame for her broken toys or cover for her missed curfews. "You had no right," she began as soon as I closed the door. "No right to humiliate me in front of everyone like that." I felt a flash of anger. I had no right? "You've been lying to everyone for 3 years while taking my money." "I never asked you to pay my rent," Jessica countered, following me into the kitchen. "You offered. Because you were crying on my couch saying you were going to be evicted." I poured another cup of coffee, not offering her one. "And yes, I offered. But I didn't offer to become your secret ATM while you told everyone you were doing fine on your own." Jessica sank into one of my kitchen chairs, tears forming again. "You don't understand how hard it's been for me. After losing my job, I felt like such a failure. Mom and Dad always expected me to succeed. They expected both of us to succeed," I corrected her. "The difference is, they forgave your failures and celebrated your smallest victories, while nothing I did was ever enough." "That's not true," Jessica protested weakly. "Really? I made senior financial analyst after just 4 years at the firm, a position that took others 7 years to reach. Dad's response was to call me selfish for wanting to use some of my bonus for a vacation. A vacation I've put off for 3 years, while sending you money." Jessica looked down at her hands. "I need that money, Adriana. Scott and I can't afford the full rent on our apartment without your help." I stared at her in disbelief. "That's why you came here? Not to apologize, but to ask me to keep paying?" "Just for a few more months," she pleaded, "until I find something stable." "Have you even been looking? Because from your Instagram posts, it seems like you've had plenty of time for brunches and shopping trips." Jessica's expression changed subtly, a flicker of something defensive crossing her face before she composed herself. "Social media isn't real life. You know that." "Then what is real, Jessica? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you've been using my money not for necessities, but for maintaining your image." What happened next shocked me more than anything the previous night. Instead of more tears or denials, Jessica's demeanor changed completely. She sat up straighter, wiped her eyes, and looked at me with clear calculation. "Fine. You want the truth? Scott and I have been struggling, but not just with rent. We've been putting your money toward other things too." "What things?" "My shopping helps me cope with depression," she said defensively, "and we've needed to keep up appearances with our friends. Do you know how embarrassing it is to be the only couple who can't go out for dinner or take weekend trips?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "So my overtime hours have been funding your social life?" "It's not just that," she continued, seeming almost relieved to finally speak openly. "Our landlord thinks we're barely making ends meet. I've told him sob stories so often that he's given us extensions on the rent multiple times, even though we actually had the money from you." The revelation hit me like a truck. Not only had Jessica been lying to our family about her financial independence, but she'd also been manipulating her landlord while using my money for luxury purchases. "You've been lying to your landlord too? Where's my money been going then?" Jessica had the decency to look slightly ashamed. Designer bags, Weekend getaways when you were too busy working to notice I was out of town. Scott wanted a new gaming system. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Does Scott know about all this? That you've been lying about where the money comes from and goes? He knows we get help with rent, she said vaguely. He doesn't know all the details. So you're lying to your husband too. Jessica's eyes hardened. Don't judge me. You have no idea what it's like living in your shadow. Perfect Adriana with her perfect career and perfect finances. Some of us struggle with real problems. Real problems that you create, I exploded. I'm done, Jessica. Not another penny. You can't do that, she exclaimed, real panic in her voice now. We'll be evicted. Then it's time you actually faced consequences for your actions instead of having me bail you out while you shop for designer bags. Jessica's expression turned ugly. If you cut me off, I'll make sure everyone knows what a terrible sister you've been. How you've held this money over my head and used it to control me. Control you? I've never asked for anything in return. Mom and Dad won't see it that way, she threatened. They'll see you as the selfish one who abandoned her struggling sister. In that moment, I realized just how manipulative Jessica had become, or perhaps had always been. This wasn't about need. It was about entitlement and a lifetime of getting her way. Get out, I said quietly. You'll regret this, she said, grabbing her purse. When Scott and I are homeless, I hope you can live with yourself. As the door slammed behind her, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. For 3 years, I had carried the weight of Jessica's financial problems, along with the sting of my family's perception of me as selfish. Now that everything was in the open, despite the pain and anger, I felt lighter. My phone buzzed with a text from Scott. Jessica just left your place. Can we meet at Carter's Cafe at 2? Alone. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying, I'll be there. Whatever came next, one thing was certain: I was done being my sister's secret benefactor while she painted herself as the family saint. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my adult life. My mother called daily, not to apologize for years of unfair judgment, but to plead Jessica's case. Your sister might be evicted, Adriana, she said during our 3rd call. Is that what you want? For your own sister to be homeless? What I want, I replied, trying to keep my voice level, is for Jessica to take responsibility for once. She's 30 years old, Mom. If she can't pay her rent, she should find a cheaper apartment or get a steady job like everyone else. She's trying. You know how hard the job market is these days. I bit my tongue to avoid pointing out that I had found and kept a job through the same economic conditions. She hasn't been trying. Scott told me she's turned down 3 job offers this year because they weren't fulfilling enough. The conversation with Scott at Carter's Cafe had been eye-opening. Unlike my sister, he had come armed with apologies and gratitude. I had no idea you were the one helping us all this time, he had said, shame evident in his expression. Jessica told me her parents were covering the difference when we were short. I worked 60 hours a week trying to keep us afloat, and still, it wasn't enough. I learned that Scott had been under the impression that they were barely making rent each month, with no idea that Jessica had additional funds from me that she was spending elsewhere. He showed me credit card statements on his phone, statements he'd only recently discovered, revealing thousands in clothing purchases, spa days, and expensive lunches with friends. I thought we were struggling together, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Now I find out she's been lying about our finances for years. My mother, however, remained firmly in Jessica's corner. Your sister is sensitive. You've always been the strong one, able to handle anything. Jessica needs more support. And she's been getting it secretly from me for 3 years, while everyone thought I was the selfish one. After that call, my cousin Taylor reached out. We had once been close, but like most of my family relationships, our connection had suffered as I worked more hours to support both myself and Jessica. I thought you should know, Taylor said carefully. Jessica's been saying some things about you to the family. My stomach tightened. What kinds of things? She's telling everyone that you made up the whole story about paying her rent to embarrass her. She's saying you've been acting strange lately, making things up, and that she's worried about your mental health. The betrayal cut deep. Not content with taking my money for years, Jessica was now actively trying to discredit me to preserve her image with the family. Work became my refuge, but even there, I couldn't escape the fallout. My focus wavered during important meetings. My normally meticulous reports contained errors. My boss, Linda, called me into her office after I missed a deadline for the first time in my career. Is everything okay, Adriana? She asked. This isn't like you. I considered giving her a generic reassurance, but found myself telling her the whole sordid story instead. She listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly concerned. You need to take some time, she said when I finished. This promotion was meant to be a step up for you, not a reason to work yourself to exhaustion. Use some of your vacation days and sort out this family situation. But sorting it out proved impossible when Jessica was actively working against me. My boyfriend Logan, who had initially been supportive, began to question my version of events after Jessica reached out to him directly. She seems really concerned about you, he said one evening as we sat on my couch, the distance between us palpable. She says you've been under a lot of stress at work, and sometimes stress can make people see things differently. Are you seriously taking her side? I asked, incredulous. After everything I've told you? I'm not taking sides, he said defensively. I'm just saying maybe this has all been blown out of proportion. Family is important, Adriana. Sometimes you have to forgive and move on. Forgive someone who stole from me for years and is now telling people I'm mentally unstable? That's your advice? Logan and I had been dating for 7 months, not long enough, apparently, for him to truly know me or stand by me when it counted. When he left that night, we both knew it was over, though neither of us said the words. The final blow came a week later when my cousin Taylor invited me to coffee, her expression grave as we sat down. Aunt Susan and Uncle Tom remortgaged their house, she said without preamble. My parents? Why would they do that? My parents were in their 60s, their mortgage nearly paid off after 30 years. To help Jessica, after you stopped paying her rent, she went to them. Told them she and Scott were about to be homeless. They took out a new 30-year mortgage to give her money to cover back rent and deposits on a new place. My coffee grew cold as Taylor explained how my parents had put their retirement at risk to rescue Jessica yet again. They hadn't called to tell me either out of shame or because they still believed I was the villainous, selfish daughter. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried for the first time since the disastrous family dinner. I cried for the lost relationship with my sister, for my parents' blind devotion to her, for Logan's easy betrayal, and for the years I'd spent trying to earn approval that would never come. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollow but somehow clearer. The family that had raised me to be responsible, hardworking, and independent now punished me for those very qualities while rewarding Jessica's manipulation and dependence. The irony was almost funny. My phone buzzed with a text. Expecting another guilt trip from my mother or perhaps a final message from Logan, I was surprised to see Scott's name on the screen. Need to talk. It's important. Can I come by tomorrow? I hesitated only briefly before responding, yes. Whatever Scott needed to tell me, it couldn't possibly make things worse than they already were. I was wrong about that. Scott arrived at my apartment the next evening looking even more haggard than before. The dark circles under his eyes told of sleepless nights, and he had the jittery energy of someone running on too much coffee and too little rest. Thanks for seeing me, he said as I led him to my living room. I didn't know where else to go. What's happened? I asked, offering him water, which he declined with a shake of his head. Jessica and I are separating, he said bluntly, at least temporarily. I sat down across from him, genuinely surprised. Despite their problems, Scott had always seemed devoted to my sister. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. It's been a long time coming, but finding out about the money from you was the final straw. After our talk at the cafe, I confronted her about the credit cards and the shopping. How did she take it? Scott laughed, but there was no humor in it. Not well. She denied everything at first, then tried to turn it around on me, saying I was controlling and abusive for questioning her spending. When that didn't work, she cried and said she has a shopping addiction and needs help, not criticism. Do you think that's true? The addiction part, I mean. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. Maybe. Probably. But that doesn't excuse the lying. After you stopped the payments, she went to your parents without telling me. I only found out when I saw the check they wrote us. My cousin told me they remortgaged their house, I said quietly. Scott nodded grimly. Jessica told them we needed $20,000 for back rent and deposits on a new place. The truth is, our rent was current, The last of your payments covered us through the end of last month. The $20,000 went straight into paying off her secret credit cards. My heart sank further. Not only had my sister manipulated my parents into sacrificing their financial security, but she'd done it under false pretenses. There's more, Scott said, pulling out his phone. I found these when I was going through our apartment looking for financial documents. Jessica has a storage unit she didn't tell me about. He showed me photos of a small storage room filled with shopping bags and boxes, many still sealed with store tags attached. Dozens of designer purses, shoes, clothing with tags still on, jewelry boxes, and home goods that had never been unpacked. This is thousands of dollars worth of stuff, I said, swiping through the photos in disbelief. How long has this been going on? Based on receipts I found, about 3 years. Right around when she lost her job and you started helping with rent. The timing wasn't coincidental. As I supported her basic needs, Jessica had redirected money toward feeding what appeared to be a serious shopping problem. There's something else you need to see, Scott said, his voice dropping. He pulled a small velvet pouch from his pocket and emptied its contents onto my coffee table. A gold locket, a pearl brooch, and several rings clinked against the glass surface. Do these look familiar? I picked up the locket with trembling fingers. These are Grandma Rose's. Mom keeps them in her jewelry box. I looked up at Scott in confusion. Why do you have them? I found them in Jessica's nightstand drawer, wrapped in a scarf. There was a pawn shop receipt with them. She apparently pawned them last month, then got them out again a week later. Our grandmother's jewelry pieces my mother treasured and planned to divide between Jessica and me someday had been taken and pawned by my sister. I recalled a family gathering 2 months ago where my mother had been upset, convinced the cleaning service had stolen a ring. The family had rallied around her, comforting her and condemning the unknown thief. Does Mom know? Scott shook his head. No one knows except you and me. I haven't confronted Jessica about it yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Why me? Why not go directly to my parents with this? Because they won't believe me, he said simply. You know how they see Jessica. I needed an ally, someone who already knows what she's capable of. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. My sister wasn't just financially irresponsible or manipulative, she was stealing from our own mother. We need to confront her together, I finally said. She can't keep doing this. Scott nodded. I agree. But she's already spinning a narrative about both of us. She told your parents I'm controlling her finances abusively, and you know what she's saying about you. Then we'll need evidence. Concrete proof that she can't deny or explain away. We spent the next hour developing a plan. Scott would gather financial records, photographs, and other documentation of Jessica's deception. I would retrieve the banking records of my payments to her over the years. We would confront her together, and then, if necessary, bring the evidence to my parents. As Scott was leaving, he paused at the door. There's one more thing you should know. After you and Jessica argued, and she realized you wouldn't keep paying the rent, she tried to get money from Logan. She told him you had agreed to help her, but were being spiteful, and suggested that if he really cared about you, he would step in temporarily. The revelation was like a punch to the stomach. Did he give her anything? $500, according to the text messages I saw on her phone. She told him it was for groceries. After Scott left, I called Logan, who answered on the 4th ring, his voice wary. Adriana, did you give money to my sister after we broke up? His long pause was answer enough. She was in trouble. She said you were going through something and not thinking clearly, and you believed her. Just like that. I don't know what to believe anymore, he admitted. Jessica has always been so nice, so put together. It was hard to imagine her making all this up, even though I've never lied to you, even though you know how hard I work and how responsible I am with money. Another pause. I'm sorry, Adriana. I should have trusted you. Yes, you should have, I said, and ended the call. The next day, Scott and I met Jessica at a quiet corner table in a cafe downtown. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw us together, quickly narrowing with suspicion. What is this? An intervention? She asked with forced lightness, sliding into the seat across from us. In a way, I replied evenly. We know about the storage unit, Jessica. The credit cards. The pawned jewelry. Her face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Scott placed his phone on the table, screen up, showing a photo of the storage unit contents. Yes, you do. What followed was one of the most painful conversations of my life. At first, Jessica continued to deny everything, then tried to minimize her actions. It's just a few things I bought on sale. Then attempted to shift blame. You make me feel so inferior with your perfect life, Adriana. When none of that worked, something unexpected happened. Jessica broke down, not in the manipulative, tearful way I was accustomed to, but in a raw, ugly sobbing that seemed to come from somewhere deep and genuine. I can't stop, she admitted between gasps for air. I see something I want, and it feels like I'll die if I don't have it. The shopping makes me feel better when I'm anxious or sad or jealous. And I'm always jealous of you, Adriana. Always have been. Of me? Why would you be jealous of me when you're clearly the favorite? Jessica looked genuinely surprised. You really don't see it, do you? You're so competent, so put together. Everything comes easily to you. I've been trying to keep up appearances my whole life because I know I'll never measure up to you. Her words stunned me into silence. After a lifetime of feeling second, best in my family's eyes, it had never occurred to me that Jessica might feel the same way about me. Scott reached across the table to take Jessica's hand. You need help, Jess. Real help, not just money to cover up the problem. Jessica nodded, wiping her eyes. For the first time in years, possibly ever, I saw my sister without the perfect facade, just a flawed, struggling woman who had lost control of her life. I'll get help, she whispered. I promise. I wanted to believe her, but years of manipulation made it difficult to trust this sudden breakthrough. The jewelry, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. You need to return it to Mom. Today. Jessica nodded again, shame evident in her posture. As we left the cafe, I felt cautiously hopeful that perhaps this confrontation was the rock bottom my sister needed to finally change. That hope was short-lived. The next morning, I received a hysterical call from my mother. Someone broke into the house, she cried. My jewelry is gone, all of it, not just your grandmother's pieces. My blood ran cold. When did this happen? Last night, we were at dinner with the Hendersons, and when we came home, the jewelry box was empty. The police think it was someone who knew we'd be out. They're asking about the cleaning service again. I closed my eyes, the truth hitting me like a wave. Jessica had gone to our parents' house not to return the jewelry, but to take the rest of it. My tentative hope crumbled. My sister wasn't on the path to recovery. She was spiraling further out of control, and our parents were still completely in the dark about who was really betraying them. 2 days after my mother's frantic call about the missing jewelry, I received a text from Scott that changed everything. Jessica caught pawning more jewelry. Police involved. Your parents need to know the truth. Can you meet at their house at 6? My hands shook as I texted back a simple yes. The moment I had dreaded and anticipated in equal measure had arrived. My parents would finally have to confront the reality of Jessica's behavior. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, several cars were already parked outside. I recognized Scott's sedan, my Aunt Patricia's SUV, and my Uncle Robert's truck. This wasn't going to be a quiet family discussion. It was indeed an intervention. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her face drawn with worry and confusion. Adriana, what's going on? Scott asked us to gather everyone here, but wouldn't say why. He said we needed to wait for you. Let's talk inside, Mom, I said gently, following her into the living room where the rest of the family waited. The atmosphere was tense. My father sat rigidly in his armchair, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Scott stood by the window, speaking quietly with my Uncle Robert. Aunt Patricia and my cousins Taylor and Brendan occupied the couch. Everyone turned to look at me as I entered. Where's Jessica? I asked, noticing my sister's absence. She's on her way, Scott replied. I told her this was a family meeting about your parents' break-in. My father cleared his throat. Someone tell me what this is really about. Now. Scott and I exchanged glances, silently deciding who would speak first. I stepped forward. Dad, Mom, everyone, we've asked you here because there's something important you need to know about Jessica. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The person who took your jewelry wasn't an intruder or the cleaning service. It was Jessica. The reaction was immediate. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face flushed dark red. That's a serious accusation, he said, his voice dangerously low. What proof do you have? Scott stepped forward, placing a folder on the coffee table. Yesterday, Jessica was caught trying to pawn these at Golden Valley Pawn. He opened the folder to reveal photos of my mother's sapphire earrings and wedding band. The pawnshop owner recognized the unique setting of the wedding band from a police report about your break-in. He stalled Jessica and called the police. This is ridiculous, my father blustered, though his voice lacked conviction. There must be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I said firmly. Jessica has a shopping addiction that's spiraled out of control. She's been lying about her finances for years, manipulating everyone in this room and stealing to fund her habit. I explained everything: the rent payments I'd been making, the storage unit full of unused purchases, the credit card debt, and the earlier incident with our grandmother's jewelry. Scott provided bank statements, photos, and the pawnshop receipt as evidence. My mother began to cry silently, while my father's expressions cycled through disbelief, anger, and profound sadness. The rest of the family sat in stunned silence. "Why didn't you come to us sooner?" my father finally asked, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "You've always seen Jessica as the perfect daughter. Every time I tried to talk about her behavior in the past, you accused me of jealousy. The painful truth hung in the air between us." "I still don't believe this," Aunt Patricia interjected. "Jessica has always been such a sweet, generous girl. This doesn't sound like her at all." "That's the image she cultivated," Scott explained wearily. "But behind that perfect facade, she's been struggling with serious issues that she's hidden from everyone." The front door opened, and Jessica walked in, freezing when she saw the entire family gathered. Her eyes darted from face to face, lingering on the open folder on the coffee table. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice small. "We know about the pawn shop, Jess," Scott said gently, "and everything else. It's time to come clean to your family." What followed was the most difficult family conversation I had ever experienced. At first, Jessica tried to deny everything, claiming Scott and I were conspiring against her out of jealousy and spite. But faced with irrefutable evidence and the pained expressions of our family members, her denials eventually crumbled. "I need help," she admitted finally, tears streaming down her face. "I've tried to stop on my own, but I can't." My father, who had been silent for some time, suddenly clutched at his chest, his face contorted in pain. "Dad?" I moved toward him instantly. "What's wrong?" "Can't breathe," he gasped, slumping forward in his chair. The room erupted into chaos. My uncle called 911 while I helped my father lie down on the floor. My mother knelt beside him, holding his hand and sobbing. Jessica stood frozen in horror. "This is your fault," my mother spat at me, her fear manifesting as anger. "If you hadn't pushed this confrontation—" "No, Mom," Jessica interrupted, her voice stronger than I expected. "It's my fault. All of it." The paramedics arrived within minutes, quickly determining that my father was experiencing a mild heart attack. As they loaded him into the ambulance, he grabbed my hand. "Promise me you'll fix this family," he whispered, his eyes desperate. "Promise me, Adriana." "I promise, Dad," I said, squeezing his hand as tears blurred my vision. The hospital waiting room became our new family gathering place. My mother rode in the ambulance with my father, while the rest of us followed in our cars. Jessica sat apart from everyone, her shoulders hunched with the weight of guilt. After several hours, a doctor emerged to update us. "Mr. Wilson has experienced a mild heart attack. We've stabilized him, and he's going to be okay, but he'll need to make some lifestyle changes and reduce stress." Collective relief washed over the family. As everyone began discussing visiting schedules and care plans, I approached Jessica, sitting down beside her. "I don't blame you for Dad's heart attack," I said quietly. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. "You should. Everyone should. This is what I do. I destroy things. I hurt people." "That's not who you have to be, Jess. You can get help. You can change." "Why would you even want me to?" she asked bitterly. "After everything I've done to you?" "Because you're my sister," I said simply. "And despite everything, I love you." Jessica broke down then, sobbing against my shoulder as I held her. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. That would take time and effort on her part. But it was a beginning, a small crack in the wall that had grown between us over the years. Later that night, as most of the family went home to rest, I sat alone with my mother in the hospital cafeteria. We picked at tasteless sandwiches, the weight of the day's revelations hanging between us. "I don't understand how we didn't see it," she said finally. "All these years we thought we knew our daughters." "You saw what you wanted to see, Mom," I replied without rancor. "And Jessica showed you what you wanted to see." My mother reached across the table to take my hand. "I'm sorry, Adriana, for not seeing you clearly, for always assuming the best of Jessica and the worst of you." Her apology, though long overdue, loosened something tight in my chest. "I'm sorry too, Mom. I should have told you about Jessica sooner, should have pushed harder for you and Dad to see the truth." "Your father and I need to have a long talk when he's better," she said, wiping away a tear. "About a lot of things." As we walked back to my father's room, my mother leaned against me slightly, allowing me to support her weight. It was a small gesture, but it felt momentous for the first time in my adult life. My mother was letting me be strong for her, rather than the other way around. My father was asleep when we entered, his face peaceful despite the monitors and ivy lines surrounding him. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the critical, judgmental figure of my childhood, but an aging man who had been blindsided by the collapse of everything he thought he knew about his family. "He loves you, you know," my mother whispered. "He's always been harder on you because he sees so much of himself in you. He wanted to make you strong." "I know," I said, and was surprised to find that I did. Understanding my father's motivation didn't erase the hurt of years of criticism, but it helped put it in a context I could begin to process. As I drove home in the early hours of the morning, exhausted but unable to sleep, I reflected on my father's plea. "Promise me you'll fix this family." I had made that promise in a moment of fear, not knowing if it was one I could keep. Our family was fractured in ways that went far deeper than Jessica's deception. Years of uneven treatment, of missed connections and unspoken resentments, had created fault lines that one intervention couldn't repair. But for the first time, those fault lines were visible to everyone. And maybe, just maybe, that visibility was the first step toward healing. My father was released from the hospital 3 days later with strict instructions to rest and avoid stress. The irony of that prescription wasn't lost on anyone in our family, given the bomb that had been dropped just before his heart attack. Nevertheless, we all rallied around him, establishing a visiting schedule to ensure he was never alone during his recovery. I took a 2-week leave of absence from work, using the vacation time my boss had been urging me to take. My mornings were spent at my parents' house, helping my mother with household tasks and sitting with my father as he adjusted to his new medication regimen. The afternoons I reserved for putting my own life back together, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my workaholic years, reorganizing my apartment, and trying to process the emotional whirlwind of recent weeks. Jessica had reluctantly agreed to therapy, attending her first session the day after our father returned home. Scott moved back into their apartment on a trial basis, conditional on Jessica continuing treatment and maintaining complete transparency about their finances. "It's strange," my mother remarked one morning as we folded laundry together. "For so long, I worried about you working too much and not having a family of your own yet. I never worried about Jessica because she seemed to have everything figured out." I smiled wryly. "Appearances can be deceiving." "Yes," she agreed, her hands stilling on a pillowcase. "I've been thinking a lot about that, about how we've treated you both so differently. I always told myself it was because you were stronger, more independent. But now I wonder if we just made excuses to justify playing favorites." Her candor surprised me. "I used to think you loved Jessica more," I admitted. "It felt like nothing I did was ever good enough." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Adriana, we've been so unfair to you." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of my father's attorney, Gerald Thompson, a distinguished older man who had handled the family's legal affairs for decades. He had called the previous day, requesting a meeting with my parents about urgent business matters. My mother had invited me to stay for the discussion, which I took as a promising sign of our evolving relationship. Gerald set his briefcase on the coffee table, his expression somber. "Tom, Susan, I need to discuss some changes you made to your will last month." My father shifted uncomfortably in his recliner. "What about them?" Given recent events, I thought it prudent to review your estate planning. I was concerned about the significant changes you made, particularly regarding the distribution of assets between your daughters. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What changes? I asked. Gerald glanced at my father, who nodded for him to continue. After a family dinner approximately 5 weeks ago, your father contacted me to amend his will. The primary change was to leave the family home entirely to Jessica, with a small cash bequest to you, Adriana. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You disinherited me after that dinner? When I told you I'd been supporting Jessica for years? My father couldn't meet my eyes. I thought you were being spiteful. Jessica was so upset, saying you were threatening to cut her off when she needed help the most. I believed her. I thought since you were financially secure and she wasn't, she would need more support after we're gone. She wasn't upset because she needed help, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. She was upset because I exposed her lies, and your response was to punish me for telling the truth. My mother looked equally shocked. Tom, you never told me you changed the will. I didn't want to worry you, he mumbled. I'd like to review these changes, my mother said firmly to Gerald, and discuss reversing them immediately. Gerald nodded, opening his briefcase. That's precisely why I'm here. In light of recent developments, I strongly recommend reconsidering these amendments. As they discussed legal details, I excused myself to the back porch, needing air and space to process this new betrayal. The family home had been in my father's family for 3 generations. The understanding had always been that it would be shared equally between Jessica and me someday. To discover that my father had changed that plan, not out of careful consideration, but as a reactive punishment for exposing Jessica's deception, reopened wounds I thought were beginning to heal. I was still sitting there when my father's uneven footsteps approached behind me. You shouldn't be walking around so much, I said without turning around. Some conversations need to happen face to face, he replied, lowering himself carefully into the chair beside me. Adriana, I made a terrible mistake with the will. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was angry and confused, and I acted rashly. You believe the worst of me, Dad. Again. He was quiet for a long moment. Yes, I did, and I was wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things. My whole life, I've worked to make you proud, I continued, finally turning to face him. I chose my career because you said accounting was practical and respectable. I worked overtime and sacrificed relationships to be financially independent because you taught me that self-sufficiency was the highest virtue. And still, somehow, I was always found wanting compared to Jessica. My father's eyes glistened with tears, a sight so unfamiliar it momentarily stopped my tirade. I never meant to make you feel that way, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I pushed you because I saw your potential. Jessica always seemed so fragile, so in need of protection. But you reminded me of myself. Strong, capable, determined. I thought I was preparing you for the world. By constantly criticizing me? By holding you to a higher standard, he corrected, then sighed heavily. But I see now how unfair that was, how it must have felt to you. I wanted to hold on to my anger, to protect myself from being hurt again, but the sight of my father diminished by illness and humbled by the collapse of his perceptions made it difficult to maintain my defensive walls. Gerald is drawing up new documents now, he continued, not just reversing the changes, but creating a trust instead. For both of you, but with conditions for Jessica. She'll need to complete financial counseling and continue therapy to receive her full share. It was a practical solution, acknowledging both Jessica's need for help and the importance of accountability. It was, I realized, the kind of solution I might have proposed myself. That sounds fair, I said finally. My father reached over to take my hand, his grip weaker than I remembered, but still warm and familiar. I'm sorry, Adriana. For everything. I hope someday you can forgive me. I squeezed his hand gently, not quite ready to offer full forgiveness, but willing to open the door to possibility. I'm working on it, Dad. Our moment was interrupted by the sound of raised voices from inside the house. We exchanged concerned glances before my father slowly rose to his feet. We should see what's happening, he said, together. We found my mother in the living room, facing off with Jessica. Scott stood awkwardly to one side, looking torn between supporting his wife and agreeing with my mother. "You went through my things?" Jessica was saying, her voice high with indignation. "How could you invade my privacy like that?" "After what happened, you're concerned about privacy?" my mother retorted. "I found receipts, Jessica, for jewelry I've never seen you wear, dated the day after you visited your father in the hospital." Jessica's face flushed. "It was just one small purchase to help me feel better. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," my mother exclaimed. "You promised you were getting help, that you were serious about changing. And the first thing you do is go shopping again?" "I am getting help. I've been to 2 therapy sessions already." "And apparently buying jewelry in between them," I interjected, unable to stay silent. Jessica's gaze snapped to me, her expression hardening. "Of course you'd take her side. You've turned everyone against me." "That's not fair, Jess," Scott said quietly. "You know that's not what happened." Jessica rounded on him. "So, you're against me too now? After everything we've been through?" "I'm on your side," he insisted. "But that means wanting what's best for you, not enabling behavior that hurts you and everyone who loves you." My father moved slowly to the center of the room, his presence commanding attention despite his weakened state. "Enough, Jessica. Your mother and I have been talking. We believe you need more intensive help than outpatient therapy alone." "What are you saying?" Jessica asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "There's a residential treatment program in Denver that specializes in addiction and financial disorders," my mother explained. 3 months of comprehensive therapy, financial counseling, and support groups. "We think you should go." Jessica's face paled. "You want to send me away? Like I'm some kind of criminal?" "We want to get you the help you need," my father said firmly. "Help that doesn't seem to be working in your current environment." Jessica looked from face to face, searching for an ally and finding none. Even Scott, though compassionate, stood firm with my parents. "This is all your fault," she said to me, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You never wanted me to be happy. You've always been jealous of me, and now you've poisoned everyone against me." The accusation was so familiar, so expected, that it no longer had the power to wound me deeply. "This isn't about me, Jess. It's about you getting the help you need." "I don't need to be locked up," she shouted. "I made one mistake, buying one bracelet, and suddenly I need to be institutionalized?" "One mistake?" my mother echoed incredulously. "Jessica, you've been stealing from us, lying to everyone, manipulating your sister and husband for years." "This isn't about one bracelet." Jessica's shoulders slumped, the fight suddenly leaving her. "You've already decided, haven't you? All of you." "We want what's best for you, sweetheart," my father said gently. "Please, just consider it." Jessica looked at Scott, who nodded encouragingly. "I'll be here when you get out, Jess. We can make a fresh start." With a final, tearful glance around the room, Jessica nodded almost imperceptibly. "Fine, I'll go. But not because any of you are forcing me, because I want to get better." It wasn't the most gracious acceptance, but it was a start. As Scott led Jessica upstairs to discuss the details privately, my parents and I exchanged exhausted but hopeful glances. "Do you really think this will help her?" I asked. "I don't know," my father admitted, "but it's the best chance we have." Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, my mother handed me an envelope. "This came for you yesterday. It's from the family attorney." Inside was a copy of the revised will and trust documents, already signed by my father. As I skimmed the legal language, a detail caught my eye that we hadn't discussed on the porch. My father had named me as the executor of the estate and trustee for Jessica's portion. "You're trusting me with this?" I asked him, genuinely surprised. "There's no one I trust more," he replied simply. It wasn't an explicit apology for years of criticism and comparison, nor did it erase the pain of discovering I'd been disinherited. But in my father's world, trust was the highest form of respect. By placing Jessica's future security in my hands, he was acknowledging my judgment and responsibility in a way that went beyond words. As I drove home that night, I realized that our family was embarking on a new path, one with more honesty and accountability than before, but also with more awareness of our flaws and frailties. The facade of the perfect family had been irreparably cracked, but perhaps what would grow in its place would be stronger and more genuine than what we'd lost. 6 months passed like a season changing gradually at first, then suddenly complete. Jessica completed the 3-month residential program in Denver, followed by ongoing therapy and financial counseling sessions twice weekly. My father recovered from his heart attack, adopting a healthier lifestyle and a more reflective outlook. My mother discovered a passion for gardening, transforming the backyard into a sanctuary of flowers and vegetables. And I found a balance between work and personal life that had eluded me for years. The journey wasn't smooth. There were setbacks and difficult moments. Jessica relapsed twice with smaller shopping sprees. My father occasionally slipped into old patterns of criticism, and family gatherings still held undercurrents of tension. But we were talking, really talking, about the painful truths we'd spent years avoiding. On Thanksgiving morning, I stood in my parents' kitchen, helping my mother prepare the turkey while my father and Scott watched football in the living room. Jessica was due to arrive in an hour, bringing dessert that she had baked herself, a small but significant step in her recovery process of finding satisfaction in creation rather than acquisition. "Do you think she'll actually show up?" I asked my mother, voicing the worry that had been nagging at me all morning. Jessica had missed our last family dinner, claiming illness, though we all suspected a setback in her recovery. "She will," my mother said with newfound confidence. "She called me twice yesterday to confirm the time and ask about the recipe. She wants to be here, Adriana. She's trying." I nodded, wanting to believe it was true. The doorbell rang, and we exchanged surprised glances. Jessica was early for once. But it wasn't Jessica at the door. It was Logan, my ex-boyfriend, looking nervous and carrying a bottle of wine. "Logan?" I said, confused. "What are you doing here?" "I invited him," my father called from the living room. "We ran into each other at Phil's barbershop last week, had a good long talk." I shot my father a look that promised further discussion later, then stepped outside with Logan for privacy. "You had a talk with my father?" I asked, still processing this unexpected development. Logan shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to apologize to him for believing Jessica's lies about you. And to you, of course. I should have trusted you, Adriana. I'm sorry I didn't." His apology was sincere, his regret evident in his expression. 6 months ago, I might have welcomed the opportunity to rebuild our relationship, but so much had changed since then. "I appreciate that, Logan. Really. But I'm in a different place now." "I understand," he said, though disappointment flashed across his face. "Can we at least be friends? I've missed you." I considered his request. Logan had been an important part of my life, and his betrayal had hurt deeply. But holding on to that pain served no purpose now. "Friends," I agreed, taking the wine bottle from him. "And you're welcome to stay for Thanksgiving if you want. But just so you know, Jessica will be here. Actually, I should probably get going. My parents are expecting me. I just wanted to drop this off and say I'm sorry. Maybe we could get coffee sometime?" "I'd like that," I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. As Logan walked back to his car, Jessica's arrived, parking behind my father's sedan in the driveway. I waited on the porch as she carefully extracted a pie from the back seat, balancing it precariously as she made her way toward me. "Need help?" I offered. "I've got it," she insisted, then promptly stumbled on the bottom step, sending the pie tilting dangerously. I lunged forward to steady it, our hands meeting on the pie dish. "Teamwork," I said with a small smile. Jessica returned the smile cautiously. "Thanks. And thanks for inviting me." "It's Mom and Dad's house, Jess. You don't need an invitation." "I meant thanks for wanting me here. I know I've made things difficult." We stood awkwardly for a moment before I opened the door, ushering her inside to the warmth and delicious smells of our mother's cooking. The family greeted Jessica warmly. My father rising from his recliner to give her a hug, my mother exclaiming over the perfect appearance of the pie, Scott proudly squeezing her shoulder. Dinner was remarkably pleasant, conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. We talked about safe topics at first. My father's improving golf game, my mother's gardening successes, Scott's promotion at work. But eventually, as the pumpkin pie was served, the conversation turned to more significant matters. "I have something I want to say to everyone," Jessica announced, setting down her fork. "These past 6 months have been the hardest of my life. Facing my addiction, my lies, the way I've hurt all of you, it's been painful, but also necessary." She took a deep breath, reaching for Scott's hand. "I'm not cured. I still struggle every day with the urge to shop, to buy things I don't need. My therapist says that might never completely go away, but I'm learning to manage it, to understand what triggers those urges, and to find healthier ways to cope. She turned to me, her eyes sincere. Adriana, I owe you the biggest apology. For years, I took advantage of your generosity, while resenting you for your success. I was so consumed by jealousy and insecurity that I couldn't see how much you were sacrificing to help me. I'm truly sorry. I appreciate that, Jess, I said, touched by her sincerity. And I'm proud of the work you're doing. Jessica smiled tearfully before continuing. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry for the stress and pain I caused you, for making you remortgage your house, for stealing from you, for lying to you for so long. I'm working to make it right. Scott and I have been setting aside money each month to eventually help you pay off the new mortgage. My mother wiped away tears. Having you healthy and honest with us means more than any money, sweetheart. And Scott, Jessica continued, turning to her husband, you've stood by me through the worst moments of my life. You had every right to leave, but you didn't. I don't know how I got so lucky, but I promise I won't take it for granted again. Scott leaned over to kiss her cheek. We're in this together, Jess, the good and the bad. My father cleared his throat, clearly emotional but determined to speak. I have something to say, too. Adriana, the night I had my heart attack, I asked you to promise to fix our family. That wasn't fair. The problems in this family weren't yours to fix alone. They were mine to acknowledge. He looked around the table, meeting each of our eyes in turn. For too long, I played favorites. I expected too much from Adriana while making excuses for Jessica. I thought I was being a good father, but I was creating a dynamic that hurt both of you in different ways. Dad, you don't have to, Jessica began, but he held up his hand. I do, sweetheart. For years, I called Adriana selfish because she focused on her career, because she wasn't as visibly emotional or demonstrative as you. But the truth is, she was quietly sacrificing to help you when I wasn't paying attention. That's not selfishness. That's love. He turned to me, his eyes glistening. I was wrong, Adriana. You were never selfish. You were strong and responsible and generous. And I'm so very proud of you. The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear from my father brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, Dad. My mother raised her glass. I'd like to propose a toast to healing, to honesty, to our family, imperfect as it may be. We clinked glasses, a symbolic moment of unity after months of difficult work. As conversation resumed and Scott began to clear the dessert plates, my father leaned over to me. There's something else I wanted to tell you. Remember that trip to Hawaii you mentioned at the dinner 6 months ago? The one that started all this? I nodded, having almost forgotten my original plan to use my bonus for a vacation. Your mother and I would like to send all of us, actually to Hawaii for Christmas. A proper family vacation, if you're interested. The suggestion was so unexpected that I laughed out loud. You want to take a family vacation to Hawaii, all of us? If it's a terrible idea, just say so, he said, looking slightly crestfallen. It's not terrible, I assured him. It's just unexpected. Are you sure we're ready for that much togetherness? No, he admitted with a chuckle. But I think we should try anyway. What do you say? I looked around the table at my mother contentedly sipping coffee, at Scott and Jessica helping each other clear dishes, their heads bent close in quiet conversation, and felt a surge of affection for this flawed, struggling, healing family of mine. I say yes, I replied. Let's do it. 2 weeks later, I stood on the beach in Maui, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jessica joined me at the shoreline, barefoot in the sand like we used to be as children. Remember when we were kids and Dad would take us to Lake Michigan in the summer? She asked. You were always braver than me. You'd run straight into the cold water while I hung back on the beach. And you were always better at building sandcastles, I recalled, more patient with the details. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower toward the horizon. I never thought we'd get back to this, Jessica said quietly, being sisters who can actually talk to each other. We're still working on it, I reminded her, one day at a time. Do you think you'll ever completely trust me again? She asked, vulnerability evident in her voice. I considered the question carefully. I think trust is something we rebuild gradually. I trust the work you're doing, the effort you're making, The rest will come with time and consistency. She nodded, accepting this honest answer. Fair enough, and thank you for giving me the chance to earn it back. Behind us, I heard my father calling our names. We turned to see him waving from the resort's patio, camera in hand, gesturing for us to pose for a photo. My mother stood beside him, smiling warmly. Come on, I said to Jessica, offering my hand. Let's not keep them waiting. As we walked back across the sand together, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months, the painful dinner that had exposed years of family dysfunction, the heart attack that had forced us all to confront hard truths, the difficult work of rebuilding trust and establishing healthier patterns. None of it had been easy, and we still had a long way to go. But for the first time in years, perhaps ever, we were seeing each other clearly, not as the roles we'd assigned each other, not through the lens of old resentments or unfair comparisons, but as flawed, complex individuals trying our best to love each other well. I had learned that true selflessness wasn't about sacrificing without recognition or boundaries. It was about having the courage to speak difficult truths, to set healthy limits, and to offer forgiveness without forgetting the lessons of the past. As my father snapped the photo of Jessica and me against the backdrop of the Hawaiian sunset, I realized that the family I had tried so hard to please for so many years was finally becoming the family I had always needed, one built on honesty, accountability, and genuine acceptance. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was worth more than any facade of perfection we had maintained before. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping the peace and speaking an uncomfortable truth? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you courage in your own family journeys.